welcome to our podcast, Dark Side of the Moon. I'm Bella, and I'm a psychic medium.
And I'm Nancy. I'm the paranormal researcher and her husband.
That is the best title ever.
Right?
So this week's podcast, we're going to be talking about our own personal encounters with spirit or paranormal or ghosts, whatever you want to call it. Now, because I'm a psychic medium, I've had quite a bit of them, but
a couple, but probably not in that nearly as much as you have.
But we'll be talking about those and how it affected us and what went down. So this is going to be a fun little episode, and happy Halloween, everybody.
Yes, this is Halloween.
This is Halloween. So this is
Halloween.
Yes,
this is Halloween.
So this is what we're going to be talking to today. So Nancy, do you want to start with yours?
Do I start with mine? Yeah, you probably have a whole bunch, right?
I don't know if I have I have a few. I mean, a few that's like witches. It's like ghost witches, which is funny because it's like some of the themes that are in here. But yeah, do you have any that you really?
Yeah, I do have a couple personal stories. I mean, my grandmother passed away when I was 2 on my dad's side, and never really thought much of it. Because again, I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't.
Oh, you were 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I remember I used to have dreams about her a lot, which is odd because we weren't necessarily close.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have my specific dream would be I would be in the cemetery, and she was in the cemetery as well. Cemetery she's buried in.
Yeah.
And she's running towards me, and she's speaking, but she's not saying anything. Like there's no sound coming in.
Okay.
And usually I would wake up before she would actually reach me. Right. Yeah. But that's just a dream part. Okay. But as I got older, probably about 8, 9, right? My parents would be working on the farm, and I would just be putzing around outside. Lots of times I'd be on my swing set.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it used to happen all the time. All of a sudden I'd be on my swing set, and I'd look up through the doorway there from the front door, and she would just be there at the front door.
Just waiting.
Yeah, just kind of like just watching me, or she would be beside me at the swing set.
Mm-hmm.
But no speaking. That was the thing that I thought was very strange. No speaking at all, but she would be there in
like
wearing clothing.
Yeah.
Not
well,
wearing,
I gotta wear she's there naked.
Yeah, no.
Did she always wear the same clothes when she appeared to you?
No, sometimes she would be wearing like a babushka, sometimes not. Sometimes she'd be wearing the outfit that I believe she was wearing in her coffin, because we actually, from what I remember. And then other times we were wearing other things. But what became weirder as then it stopped, right? That's when I was a kid, so I couldn't figure out what was going on. But as I got older, I think I was like in my teens at that point, early teens. I'm sitting there talking to my mother, and I'm like, and I don't know how we start talking about like grandparents, because I get interested. I like history, and I ask a lot of questions. And it is good to ask questions of your parents, because they're not always going to be here. So get the stories now. That way you can pass them on as you get older, right?
Yeah.
So that always fascinated me. I love looking at pictures, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So then I'm talking about, because I'm talking about my mother, about my grandmother's passing, because I do remember the funeral and everything like that. I do remember being there and being at the coffin and things like that. I was so young that I thought she died in a snowstorm. She died in August. Why did I think she died in a snowstorm?
Because she was cold.
She was cold, exactly. But I'm sitting there with my mother, telling her a story. I go, the only memory I have really of her is I remember being at my aunt's house, being my aunt, my Tia Maria. We all have Tia Maria being born.
Yeah, I have several.
We're all like we're all congregated in her house.
Yeah.
But everybody's kind of like dressed in, and I'm saying it not thinking. I'm like, everybody's dressed in black, but she's like dressed in like this blue dress. Right, this pretty blue dress, and she's kind of like walking around everybody. But again, in my mind, I'm like, she's not speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she's at my aunt's house. We're all at our aunt's house, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but that's the only memory I have. And my mother is like, okay, the only time we ever congregated at your aunt's house with everybody wearing black was the day of her funeral. That's where we went after, for the wake.
For the wake, yeah.
Yeah, for the wake. And I'm like, oh. And now thinking of it logically, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, I don't know what to say. So that's
yeah.
So I guess that's my little ghost story.
Story.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to decide where to start. Um, okay, well, this happened actually not that long ago,
Okay.
probably within the last like 5 years or so. My husband and I and a couple of friends, we went to go visit Fort Henry in Niagara. We went to go for a visit. And we were going in there, and of course, like anything at war, always tends to have like strong sensations when you walk in. So I tend to close down whenever I go to places like that because I don't want to be bothered. I want to be able to enjoy the history because, again, we are related. I love history, and that's why we end up going places and seeing things. So we were through there, and then there was a place that you can go that was called the Lookout. It was called something Lookout, and you can go through this very narrow tunnel, which is where the soldiers would go. The Canadian soldiers, or it would be the British soldiers, I think, would go through to go look at the American side. And you could actually go through, and they had like these like things that they built so they can put the guns through and they can see their enemy on the other side. So my husband and I decided to go up first. And she stayed downstairs with her husband, and she was too afraid to go up to the lookout. So I go up with my husband to the lookout, and we're looking around and we're traveling, and all of a sudden, I hear marching, not just marching, but it's like a huge platoon is marching, and you hear it like you can hear the footsteps, doom, 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 and then I'm hearing the guns, like the gun rattling, and then like when they put the gun, like setting the gun like to trigger, I can hear it like it's outside the window. That's how close it is. So my husband is talking, talking, talking. And I'm like, wait, I said, shh, do you hear that? And when I shushed him, he started hearing the marching. And it was like it was coming closer and closer. And here we are, we're like running around because this is a full circle that you can run around. So not only can you see the outskirts of the on the other side of the enemy, but you also can see inside into the courtyard. So I'm thinking, okay, well, they're doing a demonstration, so they're all dressed as soldiers because there was people dressed as period costumes. So I go out to go look. There is nobody in sight.
Not to cause that much noise, too.
Actually, anybody there was actually because it was later in the day, and it was almost like they were going to be closing probably in half an hour. There was actually hardly anybody in the courtyard. So to have that much like soldier, like a huge platoon marching. So I remember like we're looking at the courtyard and we're just looking at each other, and we're just, well, it's not coming from the water and it's not coming from across the hall because that's pretty drastic. And then soon as my friend who's I think very sensitive herself, but she's scared of it, calls up and she's like, "Are you guys ready to come down?" Because she was freaking out. The noise stopped. Because not only was it the marching and the gun rattling that I could hear, but I could hear the murmuring of the soldiers talking to each other. So I'm like quiet
and the voices are never clear with stuff like
no. So I'm trying to figure out what they're saying. And I'm like, and so my husband's I'm like, shh, trying to figure out what they're saying. I can never hear. I could hear one voice that was a little louder than the other one. And I'm assuming it was probably the commander giving orders for them to get into their positions. Mm-hmm. That's the impression I was giving. And as soon as my friend called up, they stopped. Everything went dead silent. And it was like an eerie silence. And she never did come up. And I was hoping that it would start up again, but while he was up there, it never did. And we never heard it again. Wow. And then we ended up both going down and walking out. And that was the one thing I was like, because I've had personal experiences happen the other thing, but the fact that my husband also heard it, and it was so like.
That makes it different. Yeah. Because he heard it as well.
Yeah. The, another experience that I had was in Massachusetts. So we were staying at my sister-in-law's house or apartment actually, and she never said anything about the apartment, but when I walked into the apartment, and this again was probably about 5, 6 years ago, I got like this weird feeling about the apartment. Like it was kind of like, that feeling that you're being watched,
right? That's
the feeling I got. And I was just like, it's kind of it's always an unsettling feeling to the point where, I always feel like I'm being watched no matter what, but there's sometimes where you're like, it's a comforting thing. This was not comforting. It was like I was invading someone else's space. That's how I felt. And I felt like I was being physically pushed out of this place. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And I never said anything to my sister-in-law or her family that was there, and they never said anything to me until the next day. So we were there. I'm just going to give you the experience, and then I'll tell you what happened the next day. So we're there, and then I remember needing to go to the bathroom, and I was just like, should I ask my husband to come with me to the bathroom? That's how scared, and I don't usually scare easy now, and that's how afraid I felt, because I was like, this doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel welcoming. It doesn't feel like it's a nice feeling. I don't want to go to the bathroom by myself. So I didn't ask him, because it was like, this is kind of weird. My sister-in-law is there, and I'm going to ask my husband to come to the bathroom by myself. I mean, the apartment's not that big. So I'm like, put my big girl panties on. I'm just like, I'm going to go. Nothing's gonna harm me. But the whole time, Pat, you're sitting on the toilet and you feel that something is
Thanks
behind.
for the visual.
Well, sitting on the toilet, and you feel like it, not from the shower, not from the bathroom, but literally from the corner behind you. There's like a pipe, and I kept feeling like something was there. Something was there, and it was watching me, and it was physically, like, energetically pushing on me. And I kept getting a headache while I was there. Like, it would go away and come back, go away. So then my sister-in-law says, hey, did you guys want to sleep here?
Yeah.
And I was so hoping that my husband would say, actually, no, we're going to go back to his other sister's house and stay. And he's like, yeah, sure. And I could have killed him at that point, because I just did not feel well at all. So my sister-in-law was like, all right, we're going to put you in this one bedroom. It's the girl's bedroom. You don't sleep there anymore. So we go upstairs to the bedroom, and we get the stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know how to say it to him, that I don't feel well. I don't feel comfortable. I actually am a little afraid, and I don't know what's going on, and I don't know what's up at this place, but it's not good. I don't know what they're doing here. So then my husband says to me, this room's got a creepy feeling to it. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you think so?
Because it's like, that's my end.
Yes.
That's what you're thinking. That's my end.
That's my end. And I said, do you think so? And he's like, yeah. He goes, don't you feel like it's a little weird? He goes, I keep getting like dizzy. That was the thing. Kept getting dizzy. And I said, yeah, me too. I said, why did you tell your sister we were going to sleep here? And he goes, well, what else were they going to do? I haven't seen her in a long time. She invited us to stay. I was trying to be nice. I said, I understand that. I said, but I don't know if I'm going to sleep tonight. And he's like, I don't know if I'm going to do it either. So we ended up having to sleep with the light on. That's how bad it was. And for some reason, there was a closet door in the corner that ironically was right over top of where the bathroom was. So this one corner.
Oh, the same corner.
Same corner. And the closet door would not close fully. So, and we tried closing it, and for some reason the gap would always stay. And we're looking to see if there was something that was like holding it back. Nothing. Finally, my husband went and he actually like unhooked it a little bit and like shut it but even then it still was like a little crack. And I'm just like, what is up with this door? Could not get it to close. And we would hear things. So that night we slept there. We didn't really sleep. It was just kind of like, thing. And I heard stuff coming out of that closet all night long.
Oh, that's great.
All night long. It was the creepiest feeling ever. It was like things moving around. I'm like, is there rats here? But no, how is rats? We're freaking on the third floor. Right. So then what ended up happening is the next day, my sister-in-law with a smirk on her face says, how did you guys sleep last night? And I said, I finally broke down. And I was like, dude, I am never sleeping here again. I said, I didn't sleep in here. I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, but it doesn't feel right here. And I have to tell you guys this. And she goes, yeah. She's like, I was wondering if you guys were going to say something. And I'm like, what? So apparently, ever since she moved into that place, they've been having stuff. They've been seeing apparitions. They've been seeing like black shadows. She showed me photos of like this black shadow coming out of the bathroom.
It's like, why did you invite me here?
Exactly. So yeah, so then she said that the person, because this was like a colonial house, I guess, and they had taken it and they had made 3 apartments there.
Right.
So she lived on the top apartment.
That's pretty common for Massachusetts.
Yeah. She lived on the top apartment, and apparently there was somebody that lived like in the next apartment, because it was kind of the way the house was fixed. And then there was like actually a business below. And this lady would burn sage nearly every day. The lady that owned the business.
Oh,
And
now I know why.
yes. So what basically the gist of it was, when I finally like sat down and I was like, well, I need to connect and find out exactly what this was. I got it that it wasn't just one spirit that was there, it was actually three spirits. And they had a connection with Salem. So I think they were hung as witches and they really weren't. So that it wasn't necessarily that house, but that land that was there
Right.
was actually theirs and it was taken away. So, and I got the fact that it was like a mother and two daughters that they were hung and killed, because Salem was really only, it's like about an hour away from where the Massachusetts, not less than that, from where this place is. So, I think they were all part of the witch trials. And, if you go to Fall River, Massachusetts, this where Lizzie Borden is and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening there.
Yeah.
So apparently in that apartment, there's been a lot of turnover that happens. So somebody will move in, they'll be there for maybe 6 months and then they move out. And then on top of it being this thing where these women were there, which they were hung as witches, on top of that, they've done some really bad occult stuff in there, like taking Ouija boards and try to communicate and try to summon demons and things like that. Other people that have come in
That have lived there?
have done other stuff. So the person
geez.
before her had come in and had some kind of portal to the other side and never closed it.
Awesome.
So, and where he opened the portal, it was somewhere upstairs in one of the bedrooms, but the problem is water is a conduit for this stuff. So how these spirits would really travel between the places would be from the water system. So
From
the pipes. Where are the pipes? In the corner of the bathroom, and it goes right through the closet. The two closets. So they also upstairs would hear stuff in their closet as well, because closets for each bedroom would bump up against each other, and there was water stuff going there. So it would need a huge cleansing in order to give it out. So she ended up actually moving out of that place.
I would have
But it was bad because her son, who was actually at the time 3 years old, came to me and he said, I have a friend that talks to me all the time. And he said what the little boy's name was that talked to him. And I was like, that's not a little boy. That's something else that's pretending to be a little boy. So you need to get out of here.
Oh, that's creepy. It wasn't actually a little
It wasn't
boy?
a little boy, no. And we did a little bit of a cleansing there to try to get it so that it would calm down. But literally, in order for her to live there the next 6 months, she had to burn sage every week. She had to burn and cleanse the place every week in order to be.
If you can't do it properly, do you actually aggravate it?
No, it's already aggravated.
Yeah.
So from other people doing that. So, and you couldn't, we needed to get, I left. So there was only so much that I can do, and it needed a lot more than I could give it. So I did what I could while I was there, but there was many layers that needed to, peel back.
Right. Like
So yeah, it was like there was many layers there. So I gave peace to whatever I could that wanted to move on. But there was other things that did not want to move on, and that takes a lot more to it. And I just didn't have the know-how really to look into it deeper. And I didn't, and you need to get other people in there that do that stuff. So it was just easier just to move.
Yeah.
So she would use, so basically sage was kind of like a band-aid really for the week. For every week she would do it. She burned through a huge thing of sage.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, until she finally got her own.
For like 6 months.
It was scary. It was scary. And they kind of followed her actually after.
Yeah, it would, because it enjoyed, like it liked
there was
her.
one that stuck with them, and it followed her to the next place, and she had to do like a detachment from them. So yeah, it was pretty
Okay, you gotta go someplace else.
Yeah, it was bad.
Well,
but,
I do have another story now that sometimes when you're listening to it,
yeah, that's why I'm like, you got probably a lot.
That's right.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have a few. Actually, this was just a few years ago, probably about it's funny how you go pre-pandemic, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, right? So I was at work.
Yeah.
And my hours back then were like 1 to 9.
Yeah.
So it was like 9 o'clock, and I had a deposit to go up. So I have to call security to bring up the deposit with me, right?
Yeah.
Just that is for safety concerns, because sometimes you get crazy people.
Yes.
You never know.
Yeah.
So the security guard comes up with me, right? And we take our normal route. and we're going up these stairs, and there's nobody, and from all he knows, there's not really anybody else, and not many people in the building at that point.
Mhm.
It's during the week, there's not a lot of people around at 9 o'clock at night. So we're going up the stairs. All of a sudden, as we're going up the stairs and we're getting towards to go to this one door to get to where the deposit thing is, we start hearing like murmuring. It was like you could tell it was two different voices,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it was like muffled voices.
You can never really hear what they're
No, you
saying.
never really
Yeah.
heard the same. But it got weirder because it was the muffled voices, and even in the security guard's like, "What is that?" Because I don't know what that is either. But there should be nothing above us,
Yeah.
right? So he's like, "What is that?" So he goes. We stand at the stairs. All of a sudden, we hear the muffling, and then we start going, "What is that?" And it gets quiet, right?
Yeah.
So then the security guard, we both do the same thing. We're like, "Hello," right? And all of a sudden, we hear a voice saying, "Hello," and we're like, "What the fuck?" Right? So he
Yeah.
goes up the stairs, and there's nothing there. He went up the stairs where the voices were coming from, and there was nothing. So he came back down.
Wow.
We went to go get a deposit,
Yeah.
and then he goes, "I'm gonna check the video when I get downstairs to the security desk."
Yeah.
Everything's videotaped.
Yeah.
So I go disarm, do what I need to do, alarm the where I'm working and stuff like that. And he checks the tape and he checks the recording. And he goes, "There was nothing there, not a damn thing." Although where I work, there's been a few different ghost things that's happened. Like other employees have seen like half bodies going into the
Wow.
going into the elevators.
Half like apparitions.
Yeah, like you can see half a body. There's been other incidents where people have seen wet footprints going out the door in the wintertime, and there's
There's
been
nothing there.
nothing. Now, somebody actually died there. A few people have died there actually for different reasons, and sometimes we'll hear them. I hear like footsteps and things like that, and that kind of thing. But that was the weirdest thing because I remember that we're like, "Hello," and all we heard was like, "Hello." And we're like, "Oh, jeez, that scared the hell," because we know there's not supposed to be anything there,
Yeah.
and there was nothing there when you checked the tape. There was, you think, oh, maybe it was just a random person. There was nobody on tape.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. Getting it answered back to you is kind of scary.
And then when you're with somebody else, because it actually, you feel a little better when somebody else is with you because they kind of corroborate.
Yeah.
You heard that too, right? That wasn't just me.
I know when one of my friends passed away, which is the anniversary of his death's coming up.
Right.
Right before he passed, I kept smelling smoke, like cigarettes. And it was a particular and this is the second time this happened. It was a particular type of cigarette. It was actually the one that he usually would smoke because he was a smoker. So I kept smelling it. And I was just like, what is the smell? And then I started having like some really weird dreams coming up. And then the day that he actually died, I actually heard some noise coming from something. I think something, because there's two different times that something's happened when people have died. Actually, there's been quite a few times. I'll tell you the next one because I'm trying to figure out, because I know when my father-in-law died, something else happened. But with my friend Steele, when he passed away, it was, I think my phone like went off. It was like a weird thing. It looked like it was something like that he did. It was almost like a message. And I was just like, oh, okay, I'll get back to it. I'll get it back to it later. Get back to him later. And then literally I got, probably within half an hour, I got a message saying that he had passed. Like his sister contacted me and telling me he had passed. And I was just, I couldn't believe it. Because I think I remember asking her like when, and he had passed like the night before kind of thing. So essentially he was coming to say his goodbyes and thinking, and he kind of stuck around after a while, and that was okay. But my father-in-law passing, that happened 20 years ago now.
Yeah, 2003.
Yeah. And we were getting ready for bed, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. And then all of a sudden, my husband and I heard the door in our kitchen slam. And not only did it slam, but I also have like a decoration hanging on the door, and I heard the decoration swinging and rubbing against the door. So it was like, and I remember my husband and I stopped because it was just like, okay, well, what was that? Where this door is, there's no wind. And not to mention the fact that there wouldn't be enough wind to actually make that slamming sound, like to make it slam that hard. And we were the only ones home. So first thing we thought was like, okay, what's a burglar? But who would slam the door to let us know that he's there?
Right.
Right. So, and literally within 4 minutes of that happening, I got a phone call from my brother-in-law, and he said that my father-in-law had passed. And it literally, when the door slammed, I asked him, I said, when did he pass? And he said he just passed within 5 minutes. And we kind of gauged it that that happened when he passed. Right. It was just his way of coming to say goodbye. And then we talked to my sister-in-laws who were in Portugal, and they said that, which is there's a time difference of 5 hours between, there's a time difference of 5 hours. So this happened about 2 a.m. It would be 7 a.m. there in Portugal. And she said, I think it was a little earlier, but regardless, they said all of a sudden they heard knocking on the door, and it was like boom, 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 like really insistent knocking.
Right.
And they went to the door and nobody was there. And they're like, nobody comes at that early. And it was just like, and she said it was really distinct. It was like you heard it like do 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 stopped, and then it do 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 stop, do 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 do, like 3 separate times, and then it stopped. And then they went to the door to open it, and there was no one there. There was actually no one even on the street when they went. And then they got the phone call that their father had passed.
I would have been scared to open the door.
I don't know who went to go open the door, but someone did, right?
Who wouldn't have been. But...
So someone went to go look, and they were just like, there's no one there. So it was kind of like a weird thing that they both came at the same time. Although your mom had something that when our grandfather died.
You said it, I was gonna go with that one. Yeah, my mother had a very similar experience because she moved to Canada in the early '60s, so she was the only child that was living here with my dad, like married to my dad, and then her siblings, which is our
which is my mother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the other siblings lived in Portugal. Right. Yeah. So one morning she was pregnant with her second child. She was pregnant with my brother. And she goes, one morning she awoke to a bird just tapping at the window, right? Just tap, 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 tap. And she doesn't know what that means. I didn't tell her until much later. She didn't find out how much later exactly what that entails.
Yeah.
But tap, 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 tap. And she goes, it startled her. Startled her to the point of, after that happened, she was like really depressed and always crying, and she couldn't figure out why, right? And then I think it was 2 or 3 days later, because back then they didn't have phones. They didn't have phones in Portugal, and my parents didn't even have a phone. Yeah. So my dad had been summoned to his brothers like across the street to get some information, right? So my dad found out from his brother that our grandfather had passed away, which is my mom's dad, had passed away. So he comes over and he says, and he says to my mother, because she's like 6 months pregnant, so he doesn't want to disturb her, right? Like worrier.
Yeah.
Like, your dad is sick, and she's like, you're lying, he's dead. And he was, and it ended up being, and that's the scary part, he actually had passed. And when she did the math, they said he died on the 17th of July. And she goes, that was the exact day that the bird had come to her window and tapped her awake. Yeah. And that's when, and I told her years later, I was already like an adult, that a bird tapping at your window is usually the soul coming from the other side, to say hello and to kind of acknowledge that, and I see it as she was the only child that was living abroad. Yeah. So he was kind of coming across to say, hey, how are you, just saying hi. And then, well, ironically, when our grandma, which is her husband, passed away, we also had a bird coming to our windows. Mine was like, honestly, you guys had it, and then I had it every day for 3 weeks. That scared my mother, because that had never happened before. Yeah, and then we had it. So every day for 3 weeks, it tapped at our window while she was in like hospice, like in care. Yeah. And the morning she passed, she hadn't passed yet. Yeah. The bird was still there. Yeah. After she passed, it left. Yeah. Never showed up again. Well, so you had the same thing? Well, I had a bird. It was that was in 2015. Yeah, it nested in my front, and he would tap at the window. But on top of that, my niece, who came over, she was really young. She was like 2 or 3. She was at my mom's house, and then she kept pointing in my mom's, when this is my mom's dad, she kept pointing at somebody and going like this, like for this person, for the spirit to pick her up. And she would be waving at nothing in the living room. And my brother's like,
what is she doing? And my mom even did that. And my dad, like, what is she doing? And I said to my sister-in-law, I'm like, let's just let her go and see what she's gonna do.
Mhm.
So I remember like letting her go and seeing where she was gonna go. And she literally walked up to, I'm assuming it was the spirit of my grandfather, our grandfather,
Mhm.
and just looked up at him and went like this, and then went like this, like for him to pick her up, like asking to be picked up. And then that was, and then I picked her up and we walked back over to the kitchen area, and then she just was like waving bye-bye. So he must have been waving bye to her.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, because she wasn't scared of it at all. And then literally our grandmother died like the next day after that.
Yeah.
So I had felt his presence around for a while. And again, that was another one that I smelled cigarettes. But the cigarettes that I smelled, where you could tell it was like the original tobacco. It wasn't like the filtered nicotine ones here,
Right.
because he would have smoked like the pure tobacco from back home, because that's what he smoked. So he was one that I smelled it for a while. I smelled it for about a week.
I remember we were on edge for like, because the bird came every day for 3 weeks.
Yes.
Constant.
Yeah.
And literally, and that's why we already knew. It was like,
Yeah,
he must
we
be
knew
really
she
soon.
was she was
And
on
the
her
day
way.
she passed, the next day, the bird never showed up again.
Yeah,
And it was
never
the same bird every day.
Yeah,
That's what and we knew it because it looked
Yeah.
the same.
ours was exactly
It
the
was like a
same.
little
Mine was the
finch.
same too. Yeah, mine was the same too. And then I never saw. And that's the other thing. The smoking, like the smelling the smoke as soon as I walked in. And it wasn't always in one particular spot. It went away. Never smelled it again. Well, no, I have smelled it since again. When my ironically, when did I smell it again? Right before, a week before my uncle, who is their son, passed. It was the same exact tobacco smell that I had before.
Yeah, so I have to think of it as our grandfather.
Yeah, it's our
coming to get
grandfather
his
coming.
loved ones.
Because
Coming to greet them.
it was in the same exact spot that I used to smell before. It was the same exact smell, and this would have been their father.
Yeah.
And that's when I smelled it, when he passed away in February of this year. So yeah.
So hopefully you enjoyed our
So,
ghost stories.
yeah,
And if you
hopefully
have
you
any
would.
of your own, please put them in the comments.
Yeah, we'd love to hear them, and we'll probably actually we may read them out on the podcast.
Right.
So, but that's all we have time for. So,
And happy Halloween.
and happy Halloween! Don't eat too much candy.
Yeah, exactly.